Amen. Well, I don't know if you guys do this. Maybe I'm just the only one. I don't know, but sometimes when I'm watching a TV program like some show, and you've got characters in the show that are just doing something stupid, or they're just not making sense, um, or maybe it's not that issue. Maybe it's an issue of injustice that you just see played out in this fake scenario on this TV program, and you're just like, what? And I just kind of start yelling at the TV, and sometimes I'm just like, come on! And I'm just yelling. I did that earlier this week. I was watching something on my day off, and Sandy was in the kitchen, and I started yelling at the TV, and she was like, "Why are you yelling at me? I'm not yelling at you. I'm yelling at that person on the screen." And it was just frustrating because things were just happening that just weren't fair, and I don't like unfairness. I like justice, and I like it when everything is nicely tied up in a bow on the TV program, and the good guy wins and the bad guy loses, and everything works out fairly. And when that doesn't happen, it's unsettling to me, and I'm just like, I'm never watching that again. I just can't stand that. Which makes this part of the story really, really hard for me. Because everything that happens from the moment that Jesus is arrested to him going on a cross, it's just not fair. And it's just not just. If there was ever anyone in all of history that shouldn't be arrested, it's Jesus. If there's ever anyone that shouldn't be cross-examined, it's Jesus. If there's anyone that ever shouldn't be tortured and hung up on a cross, it's Jesus, right? It's just not fair. So getting to this point of the story, I don't know if it's hard for you, but it's really, really hard for me. Matter of fact, as I was working on this message earlier this week, at one point I didn't even think about it. I just stopped and I started working on my Easter message. And I was just like, oh, and I was getting all excited, and I was getting most of my Easter message done. I was just, and I was like, oh, wait. No, I have to jump back into this week. Because I just didn't want to work on the message this week, quite frankly. I didn't want to. I wanted to think about Easter. That's where our minds and hearts go. Easter is awesome. Good Friday's bad. But the reality is, if Good Friday doesn't happen, Easter doesn't happen either. And that makes it really, really hard. But it also makes this week and what happens this week before Easter really, really important. So we're going to go ahead and dive in. We're still in chapter 2. We're at the very end of chapter 2, verse 63. Now the men who were holding Jesus in custody were mocking him as they beat him. They also blindfolded him and kept asking him, "Prophesy, who is it that struck you?" And they said many other things against him, blaspheming him. That's a hard passage. First, we learn that the people that are holding Jesus are mocking him. That word mocking is a verb that is derived from a Greek noun, which means child. Child. So what Luke is trying to tell us is that they were making fun of Jesus, and they were doing it in childlike ways. And I don't have to tell you, children can sometimes be really, really cruel when they're just gathering around somebody. I can remember when I was in elementary school and seeing some kids gather around this girl that I think she was the first one that had glasses, and they were calling her Four Eyes and all kinds of horrible things. And man, sometimes children can be really, really cruel. And this is what they were doing to Jesus. They were mocking him like a child. And as they were mocking him, they were also physically hitting him. That word beat in the passage actually means to beat or scourge, to take the skin off of. They were hitting him so hard, scourging him so hard that skin was coming off of him. And folks, you have to understand that this isn't fair because he hasn't even been convicted yet. This was illegal. They shouldn't have been doing this. This is the epitome of injustice. But they just didn't care. They didn't care. And if that wasn't bad enough, they also blindfolded him while they were doing it. And Luke gives us an example. Thankfully, he says in the passage, and they said many other things. Thankfully, he didn't just continue to list them because I don't think I could read them all. He gives us one example. He says they were screaming out, "Come on, Jesus, prophesy. Prophesy. Who hit you?" They don't realize that Jesus actually did prophesy about this exact moment to his disciples. Look at Matthew chapter 20, verses 18 and 19. Jesus says, "See, we're going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and scribes, and they will condemn him to death and deliver him over to the Gentiles to be mocked and flogged and crucified, and he'll be raised in the third day." Jesus actually did prophesy, and they're making fun of him. And as I'm reading this, I just want to yell at this book, the Bible. Yeah, I want to yell at the Bible. And I want to say something like, "Come on, Jesus, just do it. Do it. Prophesy to them. Call out the name of the one that just hit you. Come on. Just scare them half to death. Just go ahead and do it." Or I want to say, let's turn this scene into an action movie. Wouldn't that be a great turn right here? Let's make it an action movie. Let's let Jesus go all Samson on them. Just ask the Spirit to give him supernatural strength, and he just gets up and he just starts knocking them crazy, and all of the guards are just down. It's like a kung fu movie or something. That would be really, really cool. Or at the very least, he could pray and ask for a whole squadron of angels just to come down and surround these guys, and they probably would melt to the ground. That would be justice. That would be fair. And folks, he could do it. He could do it. That's not out of the realm of possibility here. Jesus could have done it. He really could have done any one of those things. He could have taken them all out at once, and justice would have been served. But then it hits me. If he did, if he had, I would be lost. You would be lost. We would be unforgiven, unable to have a relationship with God. And we would be resigned to the fact that at the end of our days, the only thing that awaited us would be the wrath of God. And then I realized that the God who created the entire universe just by speaking, the all-powerful, can do anything Lord of the universe, in this moment did nothing. And he did nothing for me, because of me, for you, because of you. And so I sit and I read the passage. He continues on in verse 66. And when day came, the assembly of the elders of the people gathered together, both chief priests and scribes, and they led him away to their council. So day has finally arrived. They've been doing this, mocking him, hitting him, scourging him all night long. And finally day comes. It's significant that day comes because by Jewish law, they weren't allowed to make a verdict for someone until sunrise. They were required to think and deliberate throughout the night. They are now bringing him into the temple. That's where their council met. That's where they tried people, specifically in the part of the temple called the royal portico. That's where the Sanhedrin tried cases. There were typically 71 elders that were present. 71. It looks something a little bit like this here in this picture. This is an artist's drawing, but imagine this kind of scene. The elders sat in a semicircle, and the person at the front is the high priest. You have some clerks sitting at tables taking notes, and Jesus would have been standing right there in front of the high priest, in front of all of those people. Very ironic that they take Jesus to the temple, the place that was created to worship God. And now this is the place where God has been put on trial. And they asked Jesus a question. Continuing verse 66, they said, "If you're the Christ, tell us." But he said to them, "If I tell you, you won't believe. And if I ask you, you won't answer." Are you the Christ? Are you the Messiah? Sounds like a legitimate question, but it wasn't. It wasn't a legitimate question. The fact is, Jesus had already answered that question numerous times throughout the last 3 years of his life. Throughout his many, many miracles that he performed, from turning water into wine to healing the lame, healing the sick, healing the blind, calming the sea, to multiplying food, to even raising Lazarus from the dead. And while all of those things were done lovingly, they were primarily done for the purpose of proving that he is indeed the Messiah. Not to mention his command over to cast out demons from people was all evidence of who he is. And then there's his words, his teaching, backed by the evidence of his miracles and his authority. All of those things should have left no doubt in any one of their minds, especially in the minds of the religious leaders of the day who knew the prophecies from the Old Testament, who saw that Jesus fulfilled every single one. They should have known. The reality is they weren't seeking for the truth. They never were. They were probing for reasons to charge Jesus, either with heresy or with treason, insurrection. So Jesus refuses to answer them outright, because he knew that they had already made up their minds. They weren't going to believe a single word that he said. They weren't interested in the truth. And they weren't interested in answering his questions either. They didn't want dialogue. They wanted a conviction. And here's another place in the story where I just want to yell out, come on, Jesus, just look them in the eye. Just look them each in the eye and say, yes, yes, I'm the Messiah. I'm the one that you've been waiting for. And just make them cower. Make them fall over like some of the guards when they came into the garden to arrest him, and Jesus spoke, and a whole bunch of them just kind of fell over at his power. Just make that happen, Jesus. Now, Jesus doesn't do that, but in a small kind of subdued way, Jesus does respond to them. This is what he says. But from now on, the Son of Man shall be seated at the right hand of the power of God. This is how Jesus chooses to answer them. And through this one sentence, Jesus clearly communicates exactly who he is. Number one, he says that he is the Son of Man. That is a clear reference to the fact that he's the Messiah. It goes all the way back to Daniel's prophecy. Daniel chapter 7 says, "And I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven there came one like a son of man. And he came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed." Jesus, in a veiled way, is telling all of these religious leaders, I'm the Son of Man. And this vision in Daniel is both an explanation of who the Messiah is, what he's going to look like, what he's going to do, and also a pronouncement of judgment upon the people. And Jesus is telling in a veiled way to all of these religious leaders, I am the Messiah, and you're going to be judged. But that's not the only place. He also says in the passage that he is seated at the right hand of the power of God. And that comes from Psalm 110, verse 1. The Lord says to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool. Again, a reference to the Messiah, but also a reference to judgment. He says he is seated not just by God, but by the power of God. It was a seat of honor, it was a seat of authority, and a seat of power. And this absolutely enrages the religious leaders. There is no doubt that they knew exactly what Jesus was claiming as he made this statement. We see that in the next verse, verse 70. So they all said, are you the Son of God then? And he said to them, you say that I am. They got it. They got the references. They understood. 71 elders in the room, one Jesus, and he's just turned the tables on them. They were seeking to intimidate him and to humiliate him, and he makes them look foolish. And in their rage, they finally do it. They finally do it. Verse 71. Then they said, what further testimony do we need? We've heard it ourselves from his own lips. This is the moment. This is the day that the human race convicts God and sentences him to die. When I was at Bowling Green State University, very secular college, I took a New Testament class. Not like the New Testament class I took in seminary. This was taught by an unbelieving professor. And his sole goal in this New Testament class was to convince all of his students that Jesus wasn't God and that he never claimed to be God. I took it with two friends of mine, and we spent the entire class, the entire semester, raising our hands and saying, "No, that's actually not what he said. No, that's not true." And I didn't get a very good grade in that class because he pointedly said, if you try to claim that Jesus is God, you're not going to do well in the papers. But we're like, oh well. He was adamant that Jesus never claimed to be the Messiah, that he never claimed to be God. But this passage confirms that he did exactly that. Jesus says, I am the Messiah. I am the Son of Man. I sit at the right hand of the power of God. So say you. You see it too. He really is the Messiah. And the human race decides to kill God. And you know what? Jesus lets them. He lets them. He doesn't fight back. He doesn't demand a fair trial. He doesn't pray and ask for legions of heaven to come and rescue him. He doesn't go all Samson on them. He doesn't hold out hope that his followers will burst in and free him. The King, the Prince of Peace, the Lord of Glory, becomes silent. And he does so for me and for you. So as hard as it is, and it's really hard for me, as hard as it is, I want us to pause the story here. I want us to live in this moment for the next 5 days or so. Don't fast forward to the end. Don't do it. I know the temptation because I feel it, but don't do it. Don't skip to Easter. Spend time this week, as hard as it is, meditating and thinking about and living in the reality that God willingly died for you, because of you. And it's only then that Easter will truly mean something. So again, I want to reiterate, there's no questions to think through today. I just want you to spend time this week meditating, thinking, living in the reality that God willingly died because of you and for you, so that you might have life. Take some days. I know we have to work, we have to take care of kids, we have to do things, but take some space this week to live in that reality. And I know that I said let's not fast forward to Easter, but I just want to make one little plea for Easter, and to do it through a video.